Hi, everyone. I'm Allan Naim. I'm a product management lead at Google, and I work on Google Anthos. And I'm joined here by Aniket.
Hi, I'm Aniket. I'm a senior product manager at Cisco, responsible for HyperFlex.
So what are we going to talk to you about today? So we're going to talk about the Google-Cisco partnership around Anthos and Cisco HyperFlex. And we're going to provide you a technical deep dive around how these technologies are coming together to provide an enterprise-ready hybrid cloud for our customers. So from an agenda standpoint, we'll just set the foundation, a little bit of hybrid market overview. And then I'm going to drill into Google Anthos and talk about what it is and the capabilities. And then I'm going to hand it over to Aniket, who's going to walk through some of the differentiations around Cisco Google. Then he's going to show you some of the features around running GKE on-prem, which is a core component of Anthos, on Cisco HyperFlex, and even walk through a demo. And I'm going to show you a demo as well. And then we'll wrap it up with some customer stories. We have one customer in particular that we'd like to highlight. So let's get started. So as you all know, this is really nothing new, right? Public cloud, of course, is here to stay. And when you talk to enterprise customers, typically they all tell you the same thing. We want to do hybrid, and we want to do multi-cloud. But very few are actually doing it, right? And the reason's the complexity associated with it. Every environment's different. Many applications are hard to migrate. As a matter of fact, with the adoption of containers over the last several years, it's made the topic of portability more relevant and more real, but it's still hard to migrate traditional applications into containers. So the major reason why many people say they want hybrid that don't actually move in that direction is really cost and complexity, right? When you move to a hybrid environment, your operational expenses go up because now you have to really build tools and hire people for these different environments. So you're forced to make trade-offs, right? Traditional enterprise, typical enterprise, most companies that are running mission-critical applications or any applications these days, they all want security, reliability, and portability, right? But they don't want to sacrifice anything for that. So with security, right, the whole idea here is with cloud-native technologies, we bring these set of technologies that enable developers and enterprises really to move faster. But then how do you move faster without sacrificing on security? At the same time, taking advantage of cloud-native technology, you're able to really get the benefit of as much compute and pack as much compute as possible in those machines and take it in lower costs. And at the same time, when you're portable, you can actually negotiate with your different cloud providers the best deal because you can easily move applications around. But you don't want to sacrifice on reliability. And then consistency becomes a very important topic because at the end of the day, if you are building applications that are portable, you want to be able to operate them in a consistent fashion across these environments. And that's a challenge. So when we think about hybrid done right, it really starts with an integrated software stack that is basically built on open source technology and leverages programmable APIs to orchestrate the underlying infrastructure. Those are the three main components for hybrid strategy. And this is what we built with Google Cloud Anthos. Back in April this year, we announced Anthos at our Cloud Next event. And Anthos is really Google's hybrid platform. It's our modernization platform for enterprises that are going down the digital transformation journey and want the ability to build an application once, write it once, and deploy it anywhere, right? And that's not just for the application. It's really about enabling teams within the organization to work together and collaborate together without being obstacles to each other. At the heart of Anthos is Kubernetes. And we've taken Google Cloud's managed Kubernetes, which is Google Kubernetes Engine, and made it possible to run Google Kubernetes Engine, not just on Google Cloud, but on-premise. And this is what we're going to be showing you today in terms of running GKE on HyperFlex. And the idea is we want to extend that to make it a consistent experience regardless of where you're running. For the past 4 years, Google's been investing in building the best managed Kubernetes service on the planet. Through our experience in building Kubernetes, to our SRE teams that maintain and run the service, to all the various capabilities that we provide around managed Kubernetes to our customers around the world. We've taken all these key learnings with Google Kubernetes Engine and provided that level of automation so that as an enterprise customer, you get those benefits when you're running Kubernetes in your own data center. So from a capability standpoint, what does Anthos provide you? I mentioned earlier the whole notion around it was the ability to build your application once and deploy anywhere. At the root of Anthos is GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine. And this is your container orchestrator that runs on a layer of compute that basically provides a consistent container orchestration experience, regardless if you're running your application in the cloud or on-prem. There's also centralized policy management and configuration management that comes as part of Anthos. As you're building clusters and deploying clusters in different environments, you want a consistent way of applying configuration to these environments. And this is where we introduce this whole notion of GitOps around running and managing these particular clusters, these compute clusters in very heterogeneous environments. As you start building more and more applications and exposing services, you want a consistent way of managing these services and interoperating with these services. So we introduced this component called Cloud Service Mesh, which is really a managed Istio component that's driven through Google Cloud, powered by Google Cloud, that enables you now to do traffic management, observability, and secure authentication authorization for services that are running on-prem, in the cloud, and eventually multi-cloud. Once you have Anthos, you can now have a deployment model where you can leverage a marketplace to deploy applications to these different environments, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, and take advantage of all our various developer tooling, like serverless, powered by a service that we call Cloud Run, that enables you to provide serverless functionality for the developers on top of these environments. From a technology standpoint, think of Anthos as 3 core technology products. The first is GKE on-prem, and Aniket later on will be showing you how GKE on-prem works and how it runs on top of HyperFlex. So to summarize, GKE on-prem is Google's GKE distribution that we offer you as a customer to run in your data center. The second piece is called Anthos Configuration Management, and this is a GitOps feature that really enables you to manage configuration drift for these clusters that are running across your hybrid on-prem, Google Cloud, multi-cloud. And you have an ability to imply policy to these various environments and have it run using a Kubernetes declarative model, where if anything changes in terms of configuration, a controller will pick up that change and then apply a workflow to basically inform and then do preventative measures. Think of it as guardrails for your environment. And the third component of Anthos is Cloud Service Mesh. So just like GKE is a managed control plane for Kubernetes, Cloud Service Mesh is a managed control plane for Istio. So Cloud Service Mesh gives you those benefits of being able to deploy endpoints across a heterogeneous environment and then have that central management and control take place in Google Cloud.
I love containers.
Yes.
I think it's fantastic technology. The problem is not everything complies with it. We saw the same thing with virtual machines for years and years. Obviously, the dynamic nature of containers is really important to the future of development. The problem is we have a whole lot of applications in our enterprise data centers that are not going to be cloud native, compliant with containers, et cetera. Is this architecture purely a GKE kind of architecture?
No. So containers definitely are the modernization facet of Anthos. But let's say you have an application today, a mainframe, or some application that can't move to containers. What we enable you to do is drop an Envoy Proxy on that machine, on that virtual machine, and basically at least now get visibility and be able to operate against this application. So you now get the ability to see all the traffic interaction between the system, because everything going into that legacy system is going through proxy, and you start getting some of the benefits associated with managed upgrades. For example, if you have to make change to a system that consumes.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to envision what you're telling me, and I don't see it. What does this proxy look like?
So this is an Envoy proxy, right? This is a layer 7 proxy that basically sits in front of your application, and all communication hitting the app basically goes through this proxy.
It's just controlling the communication?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So at least it gives you an observability layer, right? Which oftentimes, when we talk about reducing the operational costs associated with the systems that basically can't be modernized, you start to get some of that. And that's a pretty valuable concept for a lot of enterprise customers.
Cool. It's interesting. I haven't seen anybody, and maybe because I haven't had conversation often enough, but I haven't seen anybody really give an answer as to how we can assist those, I don't know if I can call them legacy apps, maybe, that can exist in virtualization, are bound to mainframes or Unix systems, et cetera. That's interesting.
Yeah. Another capability of Anthos is a feature called Anthos Migrate. And last year we acquired a company called Velastrata. And Velastrata had a VM to VM migration tool. So we've taken the Velastrata technology and created something called Migrate for Anthos. And what Migrate for Anthos does is basically you point to a virtual machine, and it will migrate that virtual machine to Google Kubernetes Engine container.
Right.
So I'll be showing you some of that later on in a demo. But that's another tool. That's part of the tool set, but it doesn't address, what do you do with those big systems that just can't move to a particular container technology, right?
And another question. I'm not disparaging GCP. I think it's also an underutilized and very powerful tool. Is this going to be able to allow for some hybrid cloud functionality? One of the beauties of Kubernetes is it doesn't have to sit on GCP. It can sit elsewhere as well. So does that mean I can take these containers and place them on Azure, place them on AWS, place them on some third party, some other on-prem type data center?
Yeah, that's the whole point of Anthos. The whole point is we're abstracting away the underlying infrastructure as a service by going against these programmable APIs. So now you can take this Kubernetes distribution, GKE on-prem, and run it on-prem. You can eventually, we're looking at offering it up on other clouds as well. And this is a big ask from our customers that have a multi-cloud strategy. They want a consistent way of running and operating their containers across these different clouds.
Great.
From a security perspective, we wanted to ensure that Anthos provides an environment that's secure by default. So starting with the underlying GKE environment, we built in a lot of the learnings that we've gained in terms of running and managing a Kubernetes service into the GKE on-prem platform. We will provide things like upgrades, the whole automation process around upgrading clusters. There's a new version of Kubernetes every 4 months. And one of the hardest things that customers face that run Kubernetes is doing upgrades. So we're bringing a lot of the learnings that we've applied running and managing our own service to these environments. We'll also do things like security patching of the host operating system and things of that nature. On top of that, as you start thinking about service management, we're providing various capabilities around secure distribution. So ensuring that services can run on untrusted networks and have the right mechanism to be able to authenticate and authorize against each other using a certificate. Ensuring that services with mutual TLS enabled are communicating together with over encrypted traffic. Around secure workloads. Basically, we provide tooling around ensuring that all the base images that you're leveraging are secure. The container optimized experience so that your containers that you're pulling from a registry have gone through some kind of attestation and you trust that particular container and workload. I mentioned mutual TLS. This is a very important feature that we're providing around ensuring that the whole Beyond Corp model, being able to run a service from an untrusted network, and then the ability to define network access policy, both ingress, egress policy, both the layer 4 level as well as the layer 7 level. Oops. What else can I say about this slide? Anthos integrates with existing IDPs. So if you're using Active Directory, we'll integrate with things like Active Directory Federation Services and OIDC to ensure that your roles and groups or users and groups are basically mapped to Kubernetes role-based access control. And then what else? Then we have kind of the whole notion. We introduced the technology a little over a year ago around sandbox containers, sandbox VMs. These are lightweight VMs. The technology is called gvisor. So if you're running untrusted code in containers, you can put them in this lightweight sandbox VM and gain some of the benefits of multi-tenancy in terms of running different types, trusted, untrusted containers within the same.
Almost like a Ravello platform?
Not necessarily. It's more at the kernel layer, but it sits on top of the kernel and provides you really a lightweight VM that can't break glass.
Right. Cool.
So just to summarize on the Anthos piece, right? The 3 value propositions here before I hand it off to Aniket is number 1, we want to enable our customers to go down the cloud journey at a pace they're comfortable with. Cloud is not just a lift and shift proposition. You should have the ability to get the benefits of modernization and get the benefits of all the capabilities that cloud provides without just having to lift and shift your application to the cloud. So we're providing tools to enable customers to be able to modernize where they are, running their applications in their own data center and gradually moving them to the public cloud over time.
I think you should have started with that. That's a good encapsulation. That I was at the very beginning. I was where is he going to go with this? But that was really good.
Okay.
So, but ultimately that's the theme here. Right?
That's the theme.
Is avoiding the lift and shift, which is expensive and difficult and really cumbersome, and being, like you said, being able to interoperate. And,
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good. That's what I'm going to write about.
Great. The second capability is really around automating policy and security at scale. As you're building these environments across on-prem, cloud, you'll end up with many different clusters, and you want a consistent way of managing policy across all these various clusters. That's the second capability that we're providing. And finally, it's all about reducing that operational cost by providing you a consistent API to be able to manage these environments across on-prem and public cloud. So with that, I'll hand it to Aniket.
Hey, thanks, Allan. So I'm going to sort of dive into a couple of areas here. One is, what is Cisco bringing on in the context of this hybrid cloud? And secondly, just double-clicking on some of the technical details around GKE on-prem. So to begin with, I think most of you would agree and realize that Cisco technologies power hundreds and thousands of data centers. And along the way, we have been very closely watching and partnering with our customers on their IT transformation journey, cloud native journey, cloud adoption journey. A couple of things standing out very sort of strongly. One is customers, to gentleman's point, would continue to operate, run enterprise applications, some call legacy applications, VM native applications, alongside with cloud native applications. So it's truly a hybrid model in that context as well, right? The second very important point here is that as customers are adopting to the cloud native model or hybrid cloud model, that application modernization journey cannot come at the cost of impacting the SLAs of the existing applications. It cannot come, it should not come at the cost of sort of compromising the existing IT policies, governance rules, some of the tool sets, the best practices. It should not come at the cost of bypassing some of the personas here which are showing IT ops, SecOps, because I think it's very well established in the market today that if you create a shadow IT can be an alluring proposition for some near future, or it might look an alluring proposition, but it cannot be a strategy, right? So what essentially Cisco did here is we have been partnering with Google Cloud team, and we are focusing on some of the foundational capabilities that enterprises would need as part of deploying, managing enterprise hybrid cloud. So what are those, right? In some sense, your hybrid cloud is as good as what you can achieve or how you can deliver private cloud in terms of automation, programmability, IaaS. So private cloud is one area where that needs to be sort of sorted out cleanly before you start adopting hybrid cloud. The second is around security. So we're talking about traffic traversing network perimeter from enterprises, back and forth potentially, right? Definitely control traffic, but also application data traffic as well. How can you ensure a good security postures that adheres to your existing security policies? The third is around visibility, and this is visibility, it could be thought of at different vectors. Visibility is control. So you got to see what's happening in your network in VPC, while VPC is communicating to your network back and forth. So that is a very important area and challenge to some extent to sort out. And then, of course, management. We spoke about that you got to adhere and you got to address the care-abouts of your existing personas. So how can you extend your management beyond the same management tool sets and best practices to start managing cloud native applications as well? So this is really a set of areas which Cisco and Google together are focusing upon. And we strongly would like to believe that across all of those key foundational areas and capabilities, we do have industry's best of breed assets. So on private cloud, we have HyperFlex and ACI. On the secured cloud connectivity, we build on top of our Cisco Cloud Connect or CSR 1000V. We have Stealthwatch Cloud that provides network visibility, and definitely Cisco Intersight for consistent management. Right? So this is just a sort of a 10,000 feet view of what is a reference design. And you can almost imagine this is not just a solution engineering partnership here. We are jointly architecting enterprise-ready hybrid cloud as part of Anthos and Cisco HyperFlex.
Is Anthos now integrated into, you have the reference design, but is this the preferred model going forward? Because last year you'd presented with the GKE on HyperFlex, right? Which obviously that was before Anthos even was available.
So GKE on HyperFlex constitutes the on-prem portion of Anthos.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And
even if I would just want to do on-prem,
okay,
would you recommend go ahead and integrate with Anthos, even though I may need a hybrid cloud solution in the future?
I see. So if you need a hybrid cloud solution in the future, and if you know that you need that, mm-hmm. We would also recommend running Anthos on-prem as well. Okay. I believe with Anthos, there is definitely a future roadmap to support on-prem only, or at least tethered model. Mm-hmm. But again, as from the Cisco technology perspective, we also integrate into some other managed Kubernetes platforms, if you will. And Cisco has our own platform, so probably you are referring to that.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Cisco container platform. So that, if you know for sure that you're not going to go to cloud at least in the next 2-3 years, if you want to have only on-prem solution, that definitely remains to be a solution or an option there.
I guess can it plug in later is really my question, right?
Can you plug in later? Currently, there are no such plans, but we can definitely look into it.
Okay.
Is there any, if you're doing that completely on-prem, is there any feature parity or loss that you would see compared to having GKE in the actual Google Cloud?
So this is a question if you are doing Anthos on-prem. Do you have insight into that, Allan?
So Anthos on-prem has GKE on-prem as part of it, right? So the whole idea, if you're running GKE on-prem on HyperFlex, you're getting day 2 automation, right? Like upgrades, without downtime to your apps. You're getting security patching. You're getting a single pane of glass, right? Every cluster, every GKE on-prem cluster calls home, right? Back to Google. Okay. And becomes discoverable in the cluster registry. So now you're able to operate against all these clusters regardless of where they're running, and you can push marketplace deployments across them from a selected fashion.
Very cool.
So the only caveat there is today there is no on-prem only option or on-prem only control plane with Anthos.
Okay.
The control plane does reside on GCP, Google Cloud, but you can manage multiple on-prem clusters within that control plane.
Thank you.
So HyperFlex is a really rock-solid HCI architecture.
Yes.
There are other rock-solid architectures out there. I'm wondering if there's any benefit to a company, and again, most of my conversations are with enterprise customers, to having, and I imagine you can't run the Kubernetes architecture and Anthos as well as a virtualization platform on the same physical device.
If you can hold on to that thought, I have a slide coming to address.
Well, then I will.
Thank you, sir. I'll just quickly call upon the core tenets of our differentiation before addressing the question. So one of the core area of focus in terms of this sort of building a joint architecture is how can we simplify day 0, day 1, day 2 operations while operating Anthos or GKE on-prem on enterprise data centers. So operational simplicity has been a key area of focus for HyperFlex overall as well. But GKE on-prem sort of brings up some new set of challenges, and that remains an area of focus for running GKE on-prem with HyperFlex. By the way, this is where something like inter-site SaaS plays a very critical role. The second is to sort of reiterate what you just said. HyperFlex is industry's leading hyperconverged platform. So, and this is also something to keep in mind that HyperFlex runs and allow you to run virtual machines, bring your own Kubernetes and Anthos GKE on-prem on the same unified platform, if you will. And again, if you hold on to that thought, I will double click on what does that mean and how we achieve that. But so that's,
I'd love to see that.
That's one key area of focus. Some of you, in case you don't know, we are also supporting HyperFlex Edge form factor. So you can almost imagine that as part of a cloud native application adoption, a lot of Edge IoT applications are being developed within Kubernetes. So Kubernetes or GKE on-prem running on HyperFlex Edge could also be an interesting sort of form factor or deployment model for customers. The third is, of course, coming from Cisco, you can't expect anything less than Bestofbreed networking and security. The areas or the products which are mentioned on this small bullet points, each of those deserve a 1-hour session by themselves. I'm just going to quickly touch upon the overview of what to expect with some of the networking and security integration with Anthos, but we can definitely follow up for a deeper discussion there. And lastly, but not the least, I'm pretty sure you must be aware of the whole slew of CVDs or Cisco validated designs, the program itself. And Cisco has been spending thousands of man-hours, and we have been publishing hundreds of CVDs, chiefly focused around enterprise applications, right? We are sort of taking the same approach to create those blueprints for hybrid cloud, and in this case, Anthos. So that almost becomes a supported blueprint which customer can use, and Cisco can support that end-to-end. One more point here is that some of the Cisco assets, chiefly hybrid cloud assets, they're also listed on GCP marketplace. So if you're predominantly a GCP customer, if you want to transact directly with Google while consuming Cisco software, you do have an option for that as well. Okay?
I have a quick question about ACI. You've got Cisco ACI listed. Does that integrate with ACI Anywhere that was announced recently?
So it does, but it essentially builds on the foundation of some of the ACI CNI plugins or ACI Kubernetes support that is sort of ready, and that's shipping for on-prem. So ACI Anywhere is just an ability to run your control point or endpoint on cloud. So we do have some plans to integrate ACI Anywhere with GCP as well. But for the time being, think of it ACI as giving you a software-defined networking for running GKE on-prem.
Okay.
And again, I do have a slide on that. Okay, so let's double-click on HyperFlex. What does it bring? At a very high level, HyperFlex provides operational simplicity. And if you just think about it, hyperconvergence is an architecture that lends very well to cloud-native requirements. It scales out. These are scale-out file systems. Typically, we have seen significant management savings, TCO savings from all of our customer base. But something which is also important in the context of running GKE on-prem reliably is reduction in downtime, end-to-end full-stack downtime. So we build on the fact that HyperFlex, on an average, reduces 90% by 90% the downtime challenges compared to the traditional infrastructure. The second thing is the way we have designed this product is right from the get-go, it should lend itself to run VMs, containers, Kubernetes, GKE on-prem workloads, and provide the equal service levels in terms of data services and data management while operating all of those workloads on the same cluster, right? So that sort of gives you a good option to plan out your cloud-native migration and need not have to sort of replace your HyperFlex clusters. So it avoids creating silos. And thirdly, HyperFlex does offer you multiple scale points. You can scale at the converge node level, you can scale at the compute node level, and you can pay as you grow. So we do have a subscription model. So net is, this is for someone who is sort of new to the HyperFlex. But if I double click on the file system portion of it, it's very important to understand, firstly, how does the GKE on-prem look like when it runs on top of HyperFlex, and then I'll sort of take you to the file system part of it. Now, I'm going to spend a minute on this. Essentially, we are talking about running Kubernetes clusters within virtual machines. So GKE on-prem runs Kubernetes clusters on virtual machines, and it should not be surprising because GKE itself on cloud run within virtual machines on the GCP, right? Now, at a high level, we're talking about a notion of an admin cluster. So for a Kubernetes cluster, you have admin control plane, which is also known as master node that runs in a VM. And then a master node manages a set of worker nodes. Now, in the case of GKE on-prem, what you're showing on the screen, seeing on the screen here, is for every user cluster which runs workloads or services, you have a control plane which actually runs and managed by an admin cluster, okay? And then admin control plane is almost sort of a master of masters, if you will. The second thing is, while you run GKE on-prem, all the sort of operational modules like logging and monitoring tools, some of the machine controllers, you get those sort of almost out of box, and you can sort of start managing and monitoring those clusters through a GCP control plane or a cloud control plane. Now, what makes it possible is this notion of GKE Connect. So almost think of it as a GKE Connect that creates a secure connectivity between your local clusters, or specifically your control plane, and your GCP project. That connection is encrypted and secured. And depending on your authorization levels on GCP, on Google Cloud, you can either sort of view your resource consumption, you can manage on-prem clusters, and it adheres to the rules that your GCP project or a service account is following on cloud, right? Of course, I won't go into the details of how the connection gets established. It's sort of a two-way handshake. So at any given point of time, you have a control on what level of data, specifically control traffic, which is flowing across that cloud and on-prem link, if you will. But this is sort of a high-level picture. And again, the key takeaway here is that clusters run within virtual machines, right? Now,
Specifically VMware-based virtual machines.
currently, specifically VMware-based virtual machines. You're right.
Does the master cluster run in the cloud or on the HyperFlex solution on?
The master cluster would run on HyperFlex as well, right? And this GKE Connect would establish a connection between your GCP control plane and your Kube API server, which is running as part of the admin control plane. Okay? So this is what you get from HyperFlex. Now at a high level, if you imagine for any pod which needs a persistent storage or data services, right? It firstly consumes what we call as persistent volume, which is sort of carved out based on persistent volume claim. When HyperFlex file system sort of delivers the persistent volume, from the file system perspective, it treats that persistent volume the same as we treat VMDKs while running VM native workloads. It treats that the same as while exposing a block device like a LAN to workloads consuming that on top of the HyperFlex cluster. What it means is that all the data services, namely things like performance guarantees, latency guarantees, things like enterprise data services like cloning snapshot, things like data efficiency like deduplication compression, right? Even things like data encryption. Those things are equally applicable for Kubernetes clusters running pods consuming persistent volumes. We can also give you a performance guarantee based on, we have recently released a Sizer tool. And again, this is all based on the fact that we treat the persistent volumes the same as we treat our VMDKs, right? And finally, what's also very important is the zero downtime upgrade. So we do support rolling upgrade for a full stack solution, including ESXi, HyperFlex software, and firmware, etc. Very important for reliability as well. So this is just a sort of a quick, and coming back to your point, this is what you can expect while running virtual machines, Kubernetes, pods on the same platform.
So essentially the architecture looks like, forgive me if I'm oversimplifying, but you have a cluster dedicated to KBE, Anthos, and Kubernetes, right? And then you can have another cluster defined within the architecture that holds on to more traditional virtual machines running within what is overarching as the VMware-based data center. You'd have another cluster that is dedicated to VMware-based VMs.
That's possible. Either that or a single physical cluster can serve traditional VMware-based workloads and bring your own Kubernetes and Anthos Kubernetes on the same sort of a control plane, if you will.
Yeah, right. And you can essentially control, and I get hung up a bit on the NSX plus ACI interaction there. And did I jump ahead?
No, why don't you complete your thought?
They haven't always played all that well together. And I'm wondering if maybe the management layer on top of it might give a better sort of control level between the two. Or maybe you shouldn't use NSX in this architecture.
You don't have to use it. And chiefly because this is what ACI gives you or brings while operating Kubernetes workloads on the ACI fabric, right? ACI implements a couple of components, namely Open vSwitch, that essentially sits into the data path of pod-to-pod networking or node networks to node networks. And that provides you that sort of a quote-unquote overlay, if you will, on top of the ACI fabric, right? So there are 4 things that you should be aware of while talking ACI in the context of Kubernetes. Number 1 is Epic controller. You can essentially have a common policy construct that enforces and implements your bare metal to bare metal networking, your VM to VM networking, your pod to pod networking, and any other combination of this sort of 3-4 areas. Right? So that's a power, because then you are, again, keeping your SecOps happy. At the same time, developer need not have to know that whether my fabric needs to be ready for your Kubernetes network policies. The second thing is ACI Fabric does provide out-of-box load balancing options, both east and west and north-south. Again, I won't go into details of how it does that, but at a high level, based on the Open vSwitch, the packets can get sort of intelligently forwarded and switched based on the load balancing rules you have, right? And then there are some other capabilities in the fabric around PBR and ECMP and stuff like that. The third is hard multi-tenancy. So by default, Kubernetes traffic does not talk to workloads outside Kubernetes. You need to sort of whitelist it. And it also automatically creates some broadcast domains and some of the EPGs and contracts. And again, you can rightfully create a single contract that can let a MySQL server running in a pod securely connect to a backend ADDNS running on virtual machines. And all of this happens completely as part of a single policy, right? And telemetry is also very important. That's a power, because you can almost imagine for every pod, for every service in the namespace or a GKE on-prem namespace, you can get to see the entire network path, right? Your physical port, your Ethernet, your IP address, your MAC address, even your VXLAN encapsulation, all of that information gets, and you can get to see that at every pod level as well. So that's really what to expect with ACI. Again, this topic deserves a separate deep dive. The third area that is also important is cloud services routing, or what we also call Cloud Connect. This is essentially to ensure that in a brownfield environment where you have existing VPN gateway, or you're running, say, ISR, ASR routers, you can sort of securely connect to Google Cloud while the CSR, Cloud Services Router, is running in a virtual form factor. You can achieve data center to cloud connectivity. You can achieve branch to cloud connectivity. You can also sort of achieve a multi-VPC environment, if you will. And finally, network visibility. So hopefully you have heard about Salesforce Cloud. This essentially, so what happens is on the cloud side, especially around GCE and GKE, Salesforce Cloud is a SaaS service, if you will, and it integrates and it consumes VPC flow logs. So VPC flow logs is essentially all communication happening between the resources in the GCP project, right? And based on that, it sort of creates a modeling of what is your baseline network utilization. You can use that for some smart analytics. You can use that for network forensics, because you are literally tracing every packet or logs that is happening on your GCP environment. On Prem as well, it builds on your traditional network telemetry sort of sources like NetFlow or Mirror and Span and stuff like that. And it gives you a nice correlation engine. Most importantly, it acts like a threat detection engine. So it can alert you based on a security event breach that you can define in the policy framework. Okay? So just keep going quickly. These are typical use cases that we see very common across our customer base. In the interest of time, I'm going to double click on one such use case and show a quick demo. We're talking about an industrial automation scenario where on a manufacturing assembly line, you can get different types of bolts, right? One is in SAE metric, the other is sort of metric unit, centimeters, which is inches, which is not legible for human eyes. But something that can not be legible for human eyes, a machine can classify, right? So that is achieved based on a machine learning pipeline, which is developed. Again, this is a classic example of write once, deploy anywhere, which is developed in a TensorFlow with Kubernetes. And you can selectively deploy it and infer on-prem, or you can deploy and infer on cloud. And that's what I'm going to show as part of my demo here. A quick note here that almost imagine you are deploying the HyperFlex edge clusters in the manufacturing line. There are multiple images being scanned for every bolt. And based on the model which is trained previously and deployed on-prem, it is discarding the wrong bolt. So it is avoiding any sort of equipment damage, if you will, and letting pass the right bolt. So this is how the demo will look like. Okay, let's go for full screen. Firstly, for some of you finding difficult to imagine how does the GKE on-prem would look like. This is a GCP console. My first cluster is a GKE cluster running on cloud. And the second cluster and third cluster is a GKE on-prem cluster running on HyperFlex, right? So again, a common management plane, a common control plane, you can hardly distinguish which one is what. Again, you have some labels to do that. But you're starting with this, and I'm not showing the cluster creation workflow. I'm assuming that that has been already done in the past, right? So you're starting with this as a starting point. And the first thing you will do is that Kubeflow is a sort of a dashboard or a tool or a sort of a UI where you can visualize the machine learning pipelines. So in this case, what's happened, you already have a pipeline created by, imagine a developer who has created a pipeline on Google Cloud. And now, based on the pipeline, we want to train a model which is curated for this bolt identification problem, okay? So starting with a MultiCloud bolts classifier pipeline, I'm selecting that. The first thing I'm going to quickly show you is the source code. The only reason I'm showing you, just to reach the point of write once, deploy anywhere, right? This is a code that very well a developer is deploying on or creating and testing and developing on Google Cloud, right? All you've got to do is you've got to take the code. The code will also have a neural networks sort of what sort of neural networks it needs to be sort of building on. And then based on that, you are creating a new run here. So at a high level, there are stages in the pipeline. You first consume and download the data. Then you pre-process the data. Then you train the model. And then you, on one side, you check for the accuracy of the model based on tensor board. On the other side, once the accuracy is established, you deploy on-prem or you deploy on cloud. So firstly, we're going to create a new run. I'm going to give a name, say GKE on-prem, HXC live US tech field day run 1. We can give some description, say model training on-prem, inferencing hybrid. Then you also got to choose a typical experiment, which is really specifying some of the environmental variables. Then you give a quick sort of unique identifier for a model directory. Let's just say 8 because 7 was already used in the past. And then that's pretty much what you need. And you start, right? Now let's double click on what is the status of the pipeline. So here what is showing is that some of the stages are completed. There is also a notion of confusion matrix. So confusion matrix is a way of once the model is trained, you throw some random variables and some random images or data and see whether it is sort of following the expected results from the accuracy perspective. So this looks like the model is trained for rightfully so. Then you're going to Kubernetes engine to check what's happening on-prem. So here you see some of the TensorFlow machine learning pipeline services are coming on-prem cluster, which is running on HyperFlex. And some of the pods will come eventually. Now you will quickly go to the tensor board. The logs are indicative of the constant training for the model. You will go to a dashboard. Firstly, this is showing that as your number of runs, or what they call as epochs, keep on increasing, your noise levels are they keep on reducing. At the same time, your accuracy keeps on increasing. So we're talking about a model with an accuracy around 97, 99%. Now it's time to deploy the model for inferencing. So first, you deploy the model on-prem. You got to copy-paste the service endpoint to give that to a demo client. So this is what we're doing here. We're going to copy-paste the service endpoint IP address and port. And then we are going to execute the model. So this will show you that for a type 1 bolt, it is it is correctly identified with the accuracy of 97%. And then for type 2 bolt, that is also identified with an accuracy of around 94, 95%. Okay? And lastly, we will go back to the Kubeflow and now deploy on cloud. So again, it's the same thing, copy endpoint, go to the demo client, and then change the service endpoint there. And then again, you can get to see that as part of a live stream of those images, the bolts are correctly identified. Okay? And finally, the demo ends showing that on the cloud cluster, a GKE cluster running on cloud, you get the service and you are able to monitor the service and consumption around that. Okay? So that is really what I have at a high level. And now I'll hand it back to Allan.
So we're going to have to change machines.
Yes.
Wait. Okay. All right. So what you see here is an e-commerce site running in a VM. So this is a vSphere console. And in this particular case, IT is struggling with things like patch management and managing resources for Black Friday and things of that nature. So they've got their online e-commerce site that's running on-prem, and they wish that they could do better provisioning, and better capacity management and so forth. So let's go ahead and migrate this application to containers. So we go into Google Cloud Shell. This is a script that'll actually trigger a migration. This script will actually get executed in Google Kubernetes engine and trigger some events that'll actually kick off migration of the virtual machine that's running in vSphere on-prem to a container or set of containers that are running in Google Cloud. So we execute the script and basically go back to Google Cloud Platform, and you see, give it a sec here, this online boutique app. So the pods are pending. So it's creating a stateful application that consists of compute and storage. And it's kicked off a task in vSphere to actually start streaming the data from the on-prem environment to the Google Cloud environment in terms of the migration. We created earlier on another migration job, this app 2. So let's go ahead and click on the external VIP. And if we click on that, you see now how the e-commerce application got migrated from vSphere onto Google Cloud. And that's really the whole notion around Anthos Migrate that we're bringing as part of the journey to cloud native. So what you see here is actually Cloud Service Mesh. These services around our e-commerce app were created with Istio-enabled proxies. So immediately you get out of the box a service graph showing all the dependencies and what services can talk to what. So here we have a shopping cart service that's talking to payment services. But we don't just show you latencies and graphs, we also provide recommendations around security posture. So you'll notice here with all of the payment services, we have these icons here that basically tell you that, hey, your traffic's not encrypted. So we'll give you recommendations around security posture and give you the ability now to basically go in and drill into these various services and then capture the actual YAML that you can apply from a configuration standpoint. So here's the recommendation. Allow callers to communicate over MTLS. So we're saying, look, you should encrypt your traffic between these services. So you can look at the details, and now you can see basically the YAML that you could take and apply as a configuration to those clusters that you're running that'll give you mutual TLS for all your service traffic. So we'll go back into Cloud Shell, and we will deploy our YAMLs. So this is the YAML that we copied from the previous recommendation around security posture. So now what we're using is this configuration management. So we basically do a pull request on our GitHub repo and then commit this configuration into GitHub, and the controller that's running in Kubernetes will automatically pick up that configuration change and update the clusters. So now, if I click on my front end, basically I get a secure environment now where all my services have mutual TLS encryption for all the traffic associated. And that's really something that we've enabled as part of the cloud service mesh. Just to kind of take it one step further, the fact that we're taking an application, providing consistent environment, applies to multi-clouds as well, as I was able to take the same application now that Anthos enabled and deploy it on another cloud. So as you can see, I've got multiple clusters that are created in this single pane of glass powered by GKE. All these clusters are calling home back to Google. Some are running on Prem, some are running in Google Cloud, some are running on other cloud providers. And now I have a unified view of all my clusters, and I can do some pretty interesting things. I can go into Google Cloud Marketplace, which is a container marketplace. And what I'm going to show you here is basically taking CloudBees, selecting what cluster I want to deploy it on. In this particular case, I select my on-prem external cluster. And once I select that, I can deploy and basically deploy CloudBees on these clusters that Google Cloud is providing central management around. This saves you from having to specify custom configs for every different environment, getting security audits around all these various environments. You have this consistent way of deploying your marketplace applications. And what you're seeing here is basically using Marketplace to deploy all these third-party applications and open source applications to these various different environments. Cool.
So you're showing moving the application from on-prem to the cloud, or any cloud basically. What happens to the data in that case?
Yes.
Like, does this really only work for applications that are lightweight with data?
No. With the migrate that I showed you earlier, we're actually streaming the data. And we're streaming it from on-prem to cloud. And eventually we'll enable that across different cloud environments.
So it doesn't, just because I'm a storage guy, it doesn't change over, much like say a storage vMotion, it doesn't change over until the full stream has taken place. And then how does it handle a cache coherency situation?
Right. So that's correct. Once the full stream has taken place, it will basically enable that application to receive traffic. Mm-hmm. There will be cases initially where you have to do a little bit of traffic splitting between both environments, but we'll ensure that there's a replication model across both different environments.
Yeah, that sounds a little hairy.
Data's always hairy. This is an area that we're really working on fine-tuning. But initially, it'll definitely be an experience where your data will move with the application. But most customers typically aren't going to do an all or nothing. Oftentimes, they're doing sort of a staged migration into the cloud. Cloud potentially could be a backup environment. And then eventually, as you move that center of gravity to the cloud, then you can do a full migration.
Yeah, the problem is the brass ring here is full mobility. Right. And that's, ever since we first started talking about this sort of migration of cloud apps or data center apps to the cloud, the brass ring has always been, I just want to throw it wherever I want to throw it. And I want to be able to move it whenever I want to be able to move it. But the issue is the latency, the entire world of networking, right? We can't fix physics. So when you've got a particularly dense container and you're moving it and then you're splitting traffic, I think there needs to be a mechanism that says until we've got the full synchronization done with all the data that's set in cache on this from the initial machine to the source machine, that's when there has to be a cutover.
Yeah, that's how it works, but there will be cases where potentially you could have staging, dev, and test that's sitting in the
shudder.
cloud.
I shudder to think.
Yeah, love to talk to you more about that.
Yeah.
So, quick question: are you seeing Anthos as a strategic thing until that's going to be a long-term thing, or is it just kind of a temporary thing until Kubernetes cluster federations go into full production?
No, Anthos is a long-term strategy. It is our federation strategy, right? So Anthos is about running Kubernetes clusters across multiple environments and having a central control plane in Google Cloud that you manage these clusters. So a lot of what federation was trying to solve for, Anthos is solving for.
Okay, so you think that's going to be the winner in the end,
Absolutely.
as opposed to federations
This is a huge bet for Google, and it's very strategic. Okay, finally, KeyBank is actually a joint customer of ours. They're one of Google's early access customers for Anthos. They've come along the way through alpha and beta, and they're also a HyperFlex customer. And some of the benefits that KeyBank got with Anthos and HyperFlex, starting with the continuous feedback. So GKE on-prem really provided them the ability to do not only like the day one deployment for Kubernetes on-prem on HyperFlex, but also all the hard day two stuff. So when things went wrong, they were getting immediate indicators from our logmon component around how to fix things and how to operate against that environment. They gained the benefit, of course, of higher utilization that containers provide. And then, the whole notion around running a cloud-native stack on top of a hyper-converged environment, right, brings that efficiency around bringing together compute, storage, and networking, especially when you're running stateful type workloads. And then finally, the zero downtime upgrades. It's always a challenge upgrading Kubernetes, right? And you don't want to bring your applications down. And we made sure that with Anthos, GKE on-prem is providing an upgrade experience that basically doesn't allow your applications any downtime. Here's a quick list of some of the use cases that we see a lot of. We see a great deal of traction right now in financial services and retail, from banking in a box to delivering banking experience into locations where there may not be a cloud data center, to retail in particular, the ability to bring compute to the stores and be able to do sophisticated service deployments in real time so that you can really customize the user experience in an agile fashion. So, to summarize, why Google Anthos with Cisco HyperFlex? This is not a weekend project. This is engineering to engineering work that we've been investing in for the last several months around jointly architecting our platform with Cisco HyperFlex. This is a turnkey offering for customers that want a box that they can deploy in their data center that's fully integrated, that gives them all the benefits that they're looking for a cloud-native environment. And finally, this is validated and supported by both Cisco and Google, right? One entity will support your environment.